Hey guys, this will be a quick gameplay thought about Zenless Zero so far. I've played it since last year when it launched in July 4th, and it's been about 6 months. It's been a half a year. I just kind of want to share my thoughts about the game and what it has done right and done wrong, what I feel about it. So initially, I was interested in the game because I was interested in Hoyoverse games, despite not having played them. So when Genshin Impact launched, Hoyoverse was still a relatively unknown company, and their game garnered a lot of controversies. That's why I was kind of curious. Now, I didn't personally play just because I was busy at the time, and eventually, but I did follow up with the story. I was going along with streamers and such, and I was quite pleased with how they've been able to manage the game in terms of storytelling and from the looks of it in terms of gameplay, despite being a gacha mobile game. It has sort of all the divas stacked on the top of it possible. It's a Chinese gacha mobile game. That's a ripoff of Breath of the Wild. So, but from what I've been able to gather from looking at people playing it, is actually quite a good game on itself. And then they released Hungastaro, and I was like, maybe I should start playing Hungastaro. But also, I was a little bit busy at the time, so I didn't start. Now I'm a little have a little bit more free time on my hand, and but because I've been following sort of along with the story of these two games with the streamers, I didn't really feel like playing it again just because, well, I kind of already know what's happening for a lot of it, and I feel like that would be kind of boring to go through the thing I already know. Which is that's the reason why I was interested in Zenless Zero, because it's a new game by Hoovers, and there could be something interesting going on here, seeing how good they've done the previous two time. And I from the trailer that was able to that I saw, the game looks very very good animation wise, much better than both Genshin Impact and Star Rail. So I was like, well, this game looks like it could have potential. And looking at how well Hoyoverse has done for the previous two games, I was like, oh, I'll definitely give it a shot. I'm excited. So when they launched the game last year, I picked it up. So what I think? What I think after, half a year from 1.0 to 1.4. So I think overall the game is good. I think also the game has improved a lot. I'll sort of go in the patch one by one from what I can remember. So going to in 1.0, I think what has been confirmed by my experience is the game's animation is top notch. The gameplay is very smooth. They added the parry system, the bamboo system. Both of them, the parry especially is just super sick and slick, and I really enjoyed it. The story wise, 1.0 is sort of a stock story about first the just your faith in story, and then the cunning hair story, and then the Bellabog industry story, and lastly the Victoria housekeeping story. So I'd say the story is not as strong from what I've seen. Genshin Impact and Hostero was able to manage on launch, just because I feel like it's much more of a slice of a life story. There definitely doesn't seem to be as much stake going on. For instance, in Genshin Impact, you are thrown into a world and you lost your sibling, and you're trying to find him or her, and that's a really good motivator. And Honkai Star Rail, you're literally planted a bomb inside your chest, and you're trying to figure out how to get it out, right? And these are both very good motivators for you to explore further, for you to continue your path. Now, in Zenless Zero, there isn't really anything like it. You're playing at the Phaethon, who is like someone who is able to control, navigate agents in the Hollow. But and you run a videotape shop, but there's isn't really like a strong reason for you to go after something. It's sort of just like you're just living your life. You're kind of chilling. It's kind of like feel like a Persona, starting sequence where you're just kind of a student chilling about your life. Now, uh, that isn't inherently wrong, but it definitely feels it has less stake. It's less motivating. So that's what I'll say about version one. I think the story is a little weaker than Genshin Impact and Smash Bros. But the combat is actually quite interesting. With that said, though, the combat isn't like a super deep combat, despite the fact that it's a action RPG. I think, like if you compare it to something like Devil May Cry, it's definitely not on the same level of build your own combo and that kind of stuff. It's a lot more linear. A character has basic attack, dash attack, special, and EX special, and an ult. So those are the combination. Also, there's a parry, and those are the combination you can do, and those are relatively simple. I think they did it in a way to preserve, to make it so that people who are playing on mobile devices, playing on phone, tablet, can play it without too much trouble. And I think I did a decent job. I played on tablet for a while just because I was traveling, and it felt fine. It didn't feel nearly as smooth and easy to control, but it worked. So I think I applaud them for that, but that did come at a cost of the sort of how complex the game can be. So fast traveling to version 1.1. So version 1.1 was a story about the sort of the police department, and I think there is an improvement there. We get to see. I think we get so because Chingy and I think Jane Doe in 1.1, and they improved the storytelling a little bit by adding a sort of gameplay sequence where story-wise, when you get to play as Jane Doe, instead previously the only gameplay the storytelling way was through sort of this comic book style panels, and they now introduce a new way to experience that we just playing as the character who's experiencing story in Jane Doe case. So I think that was an improvement, and I think Jane Doe's story was fine. It wasn't. I have to say, it wasn't like a super deep, a super. It doesn't really have any super unexpected turns, but overall, I did enjoy it. I think it was a fine story. It has good, animation and voice acting, but it wasn't like a crazy, interesting or unexpected story on its own. But with that said, I think the characters are nice. The sort of the videos they've been able to make around the story, like the music video or like the gameplay background or like the character background story video they've been able to make for the character are quite nice, especially with Chingy ones. Then fast forward to 1.2. 1.2 we had the Sons of Caledon, I believe. Yeah. So there's where we met Caesar, where we met Bernice, and we also experienced the main story there. I think that's the point where they started to listen to the player feedback and give us some of the things we wanted. For instance, we are now at 1.3. We can walk around the game world with the either Bernice or Caesar, and eventually become everybody. And that's sort of what people wanted, because in other Hoyosu games you can play as whoever you pulled, whereas in Zenless Zero previously you can only play the main characters. So that's something that's good. They also added story for Sons of Caledon, and for me, the Sons of Caledon story is fine. Like, I think it's actually like a good story, but it's too short, and that's kind of one of my problem with Zenless Zero. I think they've told a story of essentially of betrayal, and I think it's decently done. It did at least give me some emotion, because previously when I was playing the 1.0, 1.1 story, it didn't affect me at all. I didn't feel like I was playing anything. But at least in 1.2, I felt for the characters, at least. So I think that's an improvement. But I think it still suffers from the fact that the sequence is too short. Like we don't get too much screen time for these characters, and I feel like we don't develop them enough to care about them. So despite the fact that I think they did deliver on an interesting story, I didn't have enough time for me to really care about them. So that's the thing. Now going to 1.3. 1.3 is the Section 6 story, or at least the first part of the Section 6 story. It's for Yanagi, and it's the Virtual Revenge one. And that one I think is actually quite good. I think that's the turning point. I think 1.3 is a turning point of Zenless Zero story. Because we actually have malice surfacing in the game. You know, there's someone who's trying to legitimately kill the characters, which I find finally there's some stake, right? It's no longer just like pretend play, you know, some kids game, but now we're actually getting it. And I also quite like the gameplay that they've been able to release from the for the previous characters. For all the characters, I think they have interesting gameplay, interesting character design. But 1.3 is the one where the story finally picked up. Then for 1.4 is where everything came together, because not only was the 1.4 story also really good, because it kind of tied up all the previous loose ends. Because 1.1 story, it's more really just a setup, because for Druyan, you're just tracking down this weapon. 1.2 story, it's kind of a side story. It's a story about, this festival, and how there's like one person trying to sabotage it, and eventually it did. And there's a heroic moment, and I liked. 1.3 is Yanagi, and then we finally have some stakes where we have malice against our own characters. 1.4 is where everything came together. 1.4 is, where you have basically Section 6 going after kind of what's being setting up to the main antagonist of the game, the corporations, at least one of them. And we were able to defeat one of their agents, right? But there's still a setup for the future, as apparently he's not dead yet, and there's a lot of setup for like Faithen and their connection to, I think, the White Star Academy, and what our teacher was able to was doing that apparently pissed off the people in the city. So yeah, all good stuff. I have to say, Zenless Zero is one of those games where I feel like developers are actually really active when it comes to listening for player feedback and trying to improve the game. I think it's pretty rare to see, even in Hoyu. I think Genshin Impact has had a lot of criticism about the devs not caring about what people want, and Honkai Star Rail sort of improved on that by taking the player feedback from Genshin Impact and incorporating it in Honkai Star Rail. And I think Zenless Zero take it even one step further by taking what people wanted, when the game launched, and implementing it very quickly, because it's only been 6 months. Now, 6 months might seem, well, it's a long time, but they really changed the direction of some of the game. For instance, they changed the TV mode that people really disliked, where you are. I think it's definitely a form over function. At that point, they're trying to go for a retro style of game, but they didn't end up being what people liked, and they revamped it. They made it to something like a, like a Mario game or something. Like it's a platformer, 3D platformer, and that's actually quite fun. I think it's a good way to break up pace the combat into, Mario Party or something. So yeah, I'm honestly very happy with the game. I'm really incredibly optimistic about its future, seeing how the developers is listening for the player feedback and implementing it so quickly. And I also think Zenless has the best sort of technical platform out of all the Hoyu game, because Genshin Impact has a lot of game debt, in my opinion, just because it's the first big game they attempted, and there's some design decisions that I think have not been well thought out, and eventually kind of became a baggage. For instance, I think one of the most obvious example is the weapon system, like the fact that The characters they can either use a great sword, a short sword, a bow, or a catalyst or a poem. Now that might seem a lot of options, but in reality, you know, that's actually not that much because what about guns? What about like boxing gloves? What about Torah, like all these kind of weapons or chainsaws, all these weapons that could potentially be implemented for characters. Well, now they're a lot harder to implement because you've boxed yourself into this weapon system where you can actually only pick one of these. So a lot of the interesting characters that you have nowadays um, don't even interact with the weapon system. For instance, if you look at Kenichi, if you look at Marika, like they may use a particular weapon, but when they fight, they don't actually pick it up. Like just because I think they finally realized the weapon system is too much of a burden. Now they're just using it as a stat stick. Um, but that's also not the greatest design because their basic combat is also still need to utilize the weapon like so it's kind of just like a baggage. It's not really a point to it, and I think they made it better in both Honkai Star and Zenless Zero. Because Honkai Star you have light cones, right? A light cone is really just a stat stick, and that's good because you're not limiting yourself with the variety of weapons you can have. Same goes for Zenless Zero, and this is one benefit of the game that came later. They learned from previous entries, and I think one sort of advantage that Zenless Zero has is really its platform of differently modeled characters. Like, because if you look at Genshin Impact and Quest, although they do have, I think, good-looking characters, but they're all sort of the same model, but they're just like a model a little bit differently. They're not like, if you look at all the male tall characters, all the female tall characters, all the kids characters, there's like an archetype, and they look all really similar to each other. But it's different for National Zero because almost every single character is very different. Like you get like even just like the character we have now, we have very big characters like Ben. We have small characters like Kaleda. We have Wolfman Lycan. We have like floating mage like Rena. Like they're all different. They're modeled very differently. Even the NPCs. The NPCs in Xenoblade Zero are all like made very unique, and you can put them in just random NPCs. You can put them in the previous games, and they will look like they're like an important NPC. So that's I think one thing that they've really got going for them is the animation quality, and I'm really excited to how they do it in the future. So, but I definitely think that the Hoyoverse has positioned these games to be deliberately different from each other. Like, because Genshin Impact is a open world, action RPG, and it's mostly about combos between teams. And Honkai Star is very different, right? It's turn based, not really open world, and not really focused on exploration, but much more focused on the story and turn based combat. And Xenoblade Zero is once again a different thing, where it goes the exact opposite almost to open world, and it's going for this sort of boxed experience, almost retro like it feels like 90s games, and it's a action game. So it's sort of covering all the bases of type of games right now, and I'm very excited to see what they bring in the future. Yeah. Especially from the Zone Zero. I wanted to try Honkai Star Rail just because 3.0 is releasing and it looks very promising. It looks like Honkai Star Rail is almost like Genshin's Hoyo's favorite child. Just looking at how everybody's responding to the story and how much they're putting into the narrative experience and all the promotion materials and all these things. It really looks like it's their favorite child. And also, I'm personally very partial to games that have good stories. It's honestly why I play these games. Because honestly, if I just want good gameplay, I'll play League. I think League has good gameplay. I'll play even stuff like shooters like Battlefield, I think, has good gameplay. But what these games cannot provide is an interesting narrative experience, which is what I'm looking for in these games. And I think Honkai Star Rail really fits that. Now, the problem with it is when it comes to gacha games, they do try to get you to play a little bit every day. And although that's not much, I think Zenless does a good job of limiting it because it takes like 3 minutes every day to do dailies in Zenless Zero, so it's not too big a deal. But I'm kind of afraid taking up Honkai Star Rail would take too much of my time. Because I've done it once before. I used to play Dungeon Fighter Online, and it's a 2.5D side-scrolling, beat 'em ups. That also has sort of MMO component in it, and I really enjoyed it. But I played too many characters. I played like 5 characters, and then every day just to do the dailies, I need to spend like an hour. Then I just got better out, and so I think I want to be very careful about what kind of live service quote unquote games I pick up. And from what I've seen, Koiverse is one of the better companies that does live services. But still, I want to be picky because I still want to play other games. I have a lot of games in the backlog I want to play. I haven't played Nier Automata. I still haven't finished my Skyrim modded playthrough. I still haven't played God of War 2. I still haven't played, Metal for Rich and Fantasio. All the big games that released this year I haven't played yet. Final Fantasy, all these. So I still want to have time for those. But overall, I'm very happy with Zenless Zero. And I think it is a game that I can very happily recommend, honestly, for a lot of people if you're even remotely interested in sort of this 90s style but very good animation action game that doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's in this typical hoyover's fashion, cute girls and cute boys, that kind of thing. If you're interested, I think it's worth a shot. I think the developers are one of the better developers I've seen in terms of how well they receive criticism and advice, and how fast they implement them. And I'm very happy. I'm very optimistic. I'm looking forward to what they can bring for 2.0. Because although 1.4 it does have a conclusion, because 1.4 has a conclusion, it's definitely a highlight. I can only imagine it's gonna get better later on. So yeah, I'm very excited. So that concludes my quick gameplay thoughts of Zenless Zero. Overall, I recommend it. I think it's a good game, and it's a good time to jump into just because they fixed some of the issues the biggest issue that people had in the game. Yep. So see you then.